Hey there. So this video is going to be kind of like the summary of the paper in 6 weeks project. I promised you in the last episode that I will make a video kind of like summarizing all the things I learned after I had a bit of time to process the whole experience. So after working through the holidays and then kind of like having that intense push at the end of the deadline, very close to the deadline, I went off the grid work-wise for more than a week. I just, I really knew that I needed to take a hard break from work. So I took kind of like a week off and went back, visited family, went on big walks with the dog, had long conversations with my loved ones. And now I feel like, I kind of like I had enough time to kind of decompress a bit and then recuperate and summarize my thoughts about this whole process. I'm afraid I don't have kind of like a coherent, huge overarching narrative, no hero's journey to be found here, but I summarized some of the thoughts I had about the whole process, as kind of like how this whole thing went down. So I just want to talk it over with you point by point. The first thing I wrote down when I started thinking about this experience was how crippling the lack of notes was for me. Earlier during the year and like on other topics, I had a pretty good thing going with notes. I made a video about kind of like how I work with theory, and that worked really well. But then we kind of had to shift away from one of the topics I was discussing, and then that meant a lot of my notes kind of just like moved away into an archive, never really to be looked at again. It was very kind of like discouraging, and it kind of threw off my like note-taking momentum. And I just didn't really have a specific aim on like what to read and what to take notes on. This meant that I kind of had to make these notes at the process of writing. So how I think about notes is kind of like sending a little information package to my future self. Shout out Tiago Forte from Building a Second Brain for like kind of like that like conceptualization. But I really think of like, if I write a note, I'm sparing my future self the energy of having to think these thoughts. And I think I covered my mic. Sorry. I hope you could hear. So I think of kind of like, I spare energy for my future self, right? And when I didn't have the notes on all of these complicated topics, that meant that I had to exert the energy of thinking the thoughts while also writing the paper. And, in like the last stretch of a paper writing, or even the first stretch of a paper writing, during writing, you don't really want to be doing that, right? It's much better if you think through as many things as you can before you start the writing process, instead of kind of like just starting writing and like, okay, now this is going to turn into a paper. No, it's just not a good time. And I had the same experience, by the way, with reading, because I was kind of like reading around a lot on a given topic, the same I had the notes on, and I kind of X'd that. And then afterwards, I spent a lot more time kind of like playing around with methods and coding instead of like reading papers. Partly because I just didn't really know what direction to read papers in. But not having read all of the papers that I was using hurt me immensely, because it basically meant that as I was writing the paper, as I ran into arguments which I didn't have good answers for or good citations for, I had to kind of go through like a mini literature review at the time of writing. So I'm writing a theory section, I realized that what I'm writing I don't have a citation for, and then I know it to be true, but like where did it come from? And then I kind of had to sift through like review papers and like or sift through arguments, read a bunch of papers at the time of writing, and it just really doesn't work for me. I think the unifying concept between these two is I really, really like to separate the information gathering phase and the creating phase. It's like like an explore exploit if you're a management scholar. But it's really, really two different things, right? Like when I'm exploring, when I'm reading, when I'm making notes, it's a different mindset from when you close down all browser tabs and then just get to typing. And while there will always be some kind of, like, it's like, it's the same as, compiled on execution languages versus like pre-compiled languages, like the difference between C and Python. I think. Don't quote me on that. Mixing these two so tightly together just hurt me immensely during this experience. And this is something that I really want to avoid. I think what I want to do this coming year to kind of alleviate this issue on future deadlines is to be like processing a paper, like at least one paper every day, because I have a lot of papers saved in like a to-read list in Zotero. I think every academic does, but I never really work through it, right? And I just want to have a constant, like a habit of working through these papers. And, chucking papers in a never reading them pile is also working through them. But just like knowing, kind of like building up a better mental model of the literature is just something that I need to get a bit better at and put more emphasis on. Because I spent a lot of time learning about methods and coding stuff and measures. And I think I underestimated how much it would bite me in the ass to not have this very intimate understanding and set of notes of the literature I was working from. I also learned that bullet points are not enough. And I know this is terrible news because I'm the biggest outline guy on the planet. And I had really, really good outlines. Like I had entire theory sections and method sections and research context, everything written up in beautiful outlines, and the arguments made sense. But I struggled so much with actually writing it out in fluid text. It's a pretty well-known thing that like you just need to practice to write, because academic writing is not something that you can just like magically be born with. And I just didn't really have that experience because my education wasn't really heavy on academic writing, especially like I did a pretty applied master in English. And even like in Hungarian, I wouldn't be particularly good at academic writing. And I thought like, okay, it's going to be fine, whatever. And it's really not. So this is also something that I have to get better at. Bullet points and outlines are great to kind of like wrangle with the initial ideas, but I really want to kind of write more this next year and practice more the act of turning a bullet list into fluid text. And for a long while, I thought that I can just completely like, AI-ify this task and just like send it through some magic AI. But what my supervisor said is that whatever an AI spits out is going to be such utter garbage that you just can't live with it. And she was very much right in that. And, I have pretty good prompts which can get me to like a first draft if I'm really struggling. But I feel like I don't want to rely on a crutch to be able to do that. So, for what it's worth, I really want to get better at like actually writing and turning my own outlines into nice fluid paragraphs. What ties into this writing idea is I made a video about this. I never know which side it is. So I made a video about kind of like writing to think. And I realized that not taking my own advice, because I always thought that, oh yeah, my bullet lists kind of are my writing to think. And in some way, yes, because like to structure something, bullet lists are amazing. But to really make an argument, it's difficult. And it's much better if you actually have to type it out in long sentences. It also ties into like the other video I made about kind of like thinking of your shitty first draft as a canvas that you can work from. You can make canvases ahead of time before starting painting. Revolutionary, I know. What I'm kind of want to do is like take concepts like small parts of an outline and then write it out in a few paragraphs. And that means that if I happen to need that in a future manuscript, I can just take those and then paste them in, and then it's not empty anymore. And it can be a canvas, and it's still gonna need a bunch of editing and blah, 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 blah. But I can just make canvases ahead of time. So this is kind of like tying into the whole writing to think and getting better at academic writing and all of this. I just need to write more. And I think the last point I wanted to make, and maybe this is the most important one, is that this process is sometimes just going to suck. And, research is an absolute roller coaster. And sometimes you will feel that everything is crumbling and nothing makes sense. And your idea is stupid, you're stupid, your arguments are stupid, the data is flawed, the argument is flawed, the whole thing is just a pile of crap. And I think that this is just an inevitable part of putting this much work into something, something this uncertain. And it really felt terrible, there are 6 videos that you can look at. There are some where I felt completely discouraged and disillusioned about myself and about the research I was doing and like everything, But I'm okay now, And I think this is the important takeaway here. Like, this is the important message, that it will feel like the world is ending and everything sucks, but you're gonna be okay. And I think I'm partly making this video to look at it again when I have a next, I don't know, 2 months until submission. And I will just sit down and watch this video and remind myself, you, future Gergő, if you're watching, I hope you're watching, that you're gonna be okay despite everything feeling like absolute garbage. And I think that's it. I think that was all my thoughts. Thanks for sticking around, and I hope you took away something from this. Read more, write more, and I will see you next time.